Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of Vertical Stars Podcast fourth season. My loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. This is an amazing episode because Sabir Pirzada boards the mothership to discuss Spirits of Vengeance from Marvel Comics. Now, come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Pirzada. Thank you for going to Vertical Stars Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Totally my pleasure. So, I always start with a question of inspiration to inspire your love for comics and who your earliest influences.
So, yeah, I mean, it's probably a broad answer I'll give you, which is like I when I jumped into comics, it was kind of everything. I remember Grant Morrison and Dave McKean's Arkham Asylum was the first comic I read that really inspired me in a big way because it was just unlike anything else I had been reading at the time.
Hmm.
But I mean, I dug into the really early, the very first Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, Amazing Spider-Man, Amazing Fantasy comics. Those made a huge impression on me. But really, it was sort of the transition from watching the X-Men cartoon series to then reading X-Men comics that kind of, you know, plunged me headfirst into the vast world of all these different titles and that they all cross over. At the time that I was reading, there was stuff like I was discovering Onslaught and then going back to
Hmm.
Executioner Song and Age of Apocalypse and seeing that there's all these different titles and they all had these mega crossovers and just seeing how big these worlds could be was all very exciting. So I mean, on a writing level, it was certainly the ultimate line of comics written by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Millar primarily. Those really early ones that made a huge impression on me just from a writing standpoint because they just seemed like unlike other stuff I had read, and they were available online to read for free. Like Marvel would just kind of put them up on their website, so I was kind of keeping up with them digitally. So I do credit digital comics in some way as a big element in pulling me into then being a physical reader. So.
Well, you mentioned one of my favorite storylines was Onslaught. I remember that just felt so immense when it came out. I was like,
Yeah,
every single issue was like, oh my God, this is gonna be the biggest thing ever.
yeah, totally. And they played a fun game with those of us who were starting to learn, how to collect comics because after that they kind of rebooted everything with number one
Yeah.
and this whole Heroes Reborn storyline. And so that was reader friendly for me. And it's, as somebody who's just starting to collect comics, there was all kinds of cool whatever it was variants and things like that I got into. So
Hmm.
yeah, I have very fond memories of that period of comic books.
Well, I mean, it's very cool to go from there to being a comic book writer for Marvel. You're the writer of Spirits of Vengeance for Marvel Comics. So how do you get involved in the project?
So my involvement with Spirits of Vengeance kind of goes a little bit further back to my relationship with that editor, Devin Lewis, who had recently sort of taken over these Ghost Rider properties, among other things. And I worked with Devin a couple of years ago, I think now, on a Ms. Marvel Dark Web series, which is sort of a tie-in to the larger Spider-Man Dark Web event. And so we worked on that, and then after that, we worked on another series called Cult of Carnage Misery, which featured Liz Allen getting this new sort of symbiote. Um, and that was a really fun ride that we had together. And then I ended up kind of working with other editors on other Marvel Comics projects. But when this kind of came around, that got the conversation going that maybe this was something Devin and I could work on together. And so that's how I got involved with Spirits of Vengeance. And the shape of it kind of changed over the course of as we developed the things we wanted to do with it. But yeah, the conversation kind of started with that editor, as most projects at Marvel that I've had you tend to do.
So when you think about the title for the book, you have it Spirit of Vengeance. It's not Ghost Rider, or I guess it could be Ghost Riders. So is there significance in calling it Spirit of Vengeance versus Ghost Rider?
Well, we knew from the beginning that it was going to involve quite a few Ghost Riders, and we wanted to make that clear to the reader from the jump. So I think there was a little bit of a fear that if you just called it Ghost Rider, you were going to expect a story focused on one Ghost Rider. Where it's like, no, 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 from the top, like you're gonna get quite a few Ghost Riders kind of coming in and out of this. So I think it was more clarity than anything else. Was the driving force, and from pretty early on, we knew that we were going to expand the lore of the Spirits of Vengeance by adding this other spirit that's going to be not so friendly to the Spirits of Vengeance called the Spirit of Violence. And so it just felt like that was the right title that we needed to have to kind of platform that story that we were going to try and tell. So
So so hitting on Spirit of Violence. So in your mind, how are you separating Spirit of Vengeance versus Spirit of Violence?
yeah, so that's something you all are going to have to wait and see. Issue 6 of Spirits of Vengeance does give you a clearer idea of what it's going to look like and how it kind of fits in with the Spirits of Vengeance. But really, it's kind of something that we're building to, and I don't want to give away where it's going, but those answers are coming. So for those who want to know more about the Spirits of Violence, I encourage you all to lean in. You're going to get it pretty soon.
Now, as you mentioned, there's multiple Ghost Riders in this one. There's Danny Ketch, I'm saying the last
Mm-hmm.
name correctly, hopefully, and there's Johnny Blaze, who are obviously both Ghost Riders. From the Ketch more from the '90s, Blaze from present and past. Um,
Yeah.
so, how do you differentiate the expression of their individual Ghost Rider entities?
I kind of went back to the source material, and the good news about that is that there's plenty of source material of them on their separate adventures. So going back to Johnny Blaze's origin and what he went through, and that he was this sort of stunt driver who's a little bit more rough around the edges. I kind of wanted to carry that forward in the voice I had for I was trying to put into Johnny and be true to the books that I had read on him. Danny Ketch, the thing that really intrigued me about him is that he wasn't it didn't seem to me like he was vigilante material from the jump, that he was a little bit more of like a softer type of character, and that if anything his sister was a little bit more rough around the edges, and that he was kind of just in the wrong place at the wrong time and was given this thing and kept suffering tragedies as he get pulled into a world that he was not the right fit for, and that was really fascinating. And so wanting to kind of play that forward, but acknowledge that Danny Ketch has been Ghost Rider for a long time now and been on all these adventures. So you want to play the experience that he's had as well. And of course, the relationship that they have with each other and learning that they're brothers and, all this stuff. So there's plenty to play with. But yeah, I mean, I guess I tend to write Danny Ketch a little bit with a little bit more heart, and Johnny Blaze with a little bit more soul, if that makes any sense at all.
How about the difference in their entities? Because as you play up in the series, the entities themselves are a personality. Going with
Yes.
Vengeance, going with the Ghost Rider entities themselves. How do you see them being expressed differently with your book?
Yeah, so and that's kind of I'm glad you asked that, because there's a deliberate reason why we've got as many flashbacks as we do to these characters' pasts in them. And I was trying to be very deliberate about showing a flashback and then cutting to that character as Ghost Rider with the flaming skull to remind the reader that there is a person underneath that. Like, you may be seeing Zarathos kind of doing his thing in that form, but don't forget that Johnny Blaze is behind there also. And so I want to be deliberately vague about like how we're parsing out, those personalities of the spirit versus the host. But that's exactly what the function of the flashbacks are supposed to do, which is to remind you that there is a person in there. But when they're in this Ghost Rider form, it's not just them. And so, leaving the reader to sort of imagine how that separates, you are going to get more clarity on how I see that difference, and how I see that combination moving forward in future stories. I can't talk too much about that. So that clarity is coming. But I would not assume that just because you've seen how it works with Michael Badalino and with Zala, that those are the same exact rules for Danny Ketch and for Johnny Blaze. Obviously, Zarathos has been very well defined. For Danny Ketch, it's been a little bit different, in terms of what is that spirit exactly, and there have been kind of different iterations of that through Ghost Rider. So something to kind of keep an eye on in terms of how we are going to shape and define those things moving forward.
Is there, in your opinion, a version of Ghost Rider, or I mean, whether or not it's Catches or Blazes, that's I feel like when I talk about hosts and whatnot, some reason Venom also pops in my head. Like I feel like there's like
Yeah, sure.
but there's like a difference between how that functions and how the Ghost Riders function with their kind of.
Yes. I think there is, and I would say it's markedly different from the Hulk or from Moon Knight, where you've got totally separate personalities in conflict with each other. We've obviously seen that with the Ghost Riders, so I don't want to discount that and say that that's not the rules that are applying here. You see it with Michael Badalino and Zala, where I think I start to blend them a little bit deliberately is when you're in the Ghost Rider form, where it's like, okay, there's a human underneath there, but they seem to be a little bit meaner than they usually are. They seem to be a little more violent than they might be in their purely human form. Not that we haven't seen Johnny Blaze be plenty violent just as a human. So I do want the audience to be kind of wondering, well, what percentage of this Ghost Rider is just Blaze versus Blaze and Zarathos and all that. So yeah, I consider that to be a feature, not a bug, to not entirely know where one personality ends and the other one begins, but to make them sort of separate from your like the Eddie Brock and Venom sort of type of approach, which is you've got your human and then you've got your symbiote voice. I've written plenty of symbiotes. That's fun to do, but it's kind of more fun to mix them.
Well, the interesting with Michael and Vengeance is that you clearly set like a template on how the entity and a host can feel about each other, their interactions toward each other,
That's right.
kind of how the level of desire. Like you definitely have the Vengeance entity wanting feels like needs Michael more than Michael wanted or needs the entity of
Mm.
Vengeance. When you're using that as sort of like a template with the Ghost Riders, how much is the Ghost Rider entities feeling towards their host? Is it like total acceptance? These are what I am. I want you in reverse, or is there more, or is there one more or less like kind of stuck with it?
No, there's definitely more friction. Like I would say, what we were attempting to do with Michael Battolino and with Zala is create a relationship that's a little bit different from what you see with the other Ghost Riders, and that here's a host and a spirit who get along, who kind of like each other, who feel like they need each other, and that their sum is greater than their parts. Not to say that there's no conflict between them, but it just seemed like a different relationship that we wanted to explore in a different flavor than you usually see in Ghost Riders. I would not assume that that relationship is as rosy and fun with these other Ghost Riders, and some of that is just picking up where we left off. I mean, I want to be very conscious of the writer who was writing some of these characters before me, which is Benjamin Percy, and the wonderful stuff that he did in defining, especially in Final Vengeance, that Johnny Blaze Zarathos relationship. It was extremely confrontational. So I wouldn't assume that all of that is gone just because now I'm writing it and I'm not necessarily like highlighting Zarathos's personality. And you're going to see a little bit seeds of that moving forward in future stories of exactly what that looks like. But no, it's not the rosy friendly relationship that Battleino has with Zala.
Well, and thinking about Michael Balladine, Betta, horrible names, Michael. Uh, Considering the role that the Ghost Rider had in just kind of destroying his life, is Michael correct to want vengeance upon the Ghost Riders? Is he just misunderstanding the situation?
Well, I think he definitely misunderstood the situation in the moment. That was sort of what we were attempting to do when we could sort of tried to show a little bit more of his origin story in issues 4 and 5. Now, is he still holding that grudge against those spirits? I haven't been playing that as much because I feel like that origin story I needed to show it to the audience, but it's been such a long time since then that he's kind of moved on. He's already gone to hell and come back. He's been on adventures that we've seen in all these comics, whether they're in the 90s and beyond. And he's been on adventures that we can imagine that has happened in between these things because his appearances have been kind of sporadic lately in terms of like he'll disappear for long chunks of time. But I don't want to think of any character as frozen in amber while they're just sort of waiting for a writer to be used. So this is my way of kind of defining what he is now and setting the stage a little bit moving forward. But I would hope that he's a little bit grateful that these Ghost Riders kind of came to his rescue in issues 4 and 5 of Spirits of Vengeance because he was in a bit of trouble. Granted, Zala also came, so it wasn't just them, but yeah, Michael was in a lot of trouble then.
Hey, when you think about like vengeance, is he more dependent on his host than the Ghost Rider entities, or no?
I think that's fair to say. Yeah, given where you find him in issue 1, where he's extremely weakened, and that he seems to kind of need his host in order to be whole again. Granted, I mean, you also saw the way that Zala was unleashed without a host, so I don't know that it's so black and white, but if I were to define it, I would say that he needs him. Yeah.
Does he need him because he cares about his host, or does he just need the host because he needs the body to be stronger?
I mean, that's a good question. I certainly wrote from a standpoint of saying these are a host and a spirit that actually do care about each other,
Hmm.
that feel like they belong together, and that they can accomplish a lot together. So, yeah.
And the other one, another character that's very interesting in the story to kind of get that you're expanding the mythos for Ghost Rider is a Dr. Kumar, who's a very interesting character
Yes.
in his own right.
Yes. Yes.
How much of his background are we getting?
Uh, we'll see is the answer. So what you've read in this first volume of Spirits of Vengeance is not intended to be the final word on Dr. Kumar. It's not intended to be the final word on how we may be, having some fun with setting up some elements that are in Ghost Rider 2099, which is a series I really enjoyed. So there will be more of that coming if I have my way, but we will see. And I can't guarantee it's good that element is going to happen soon, because sometimes I do a more immediate throw and sometimes I do a longer throw. That one's going to be a little bit of a longer throw if I have my way, but we'll see.
Okay, so is Ghostworks a longer throw or shorter throw?
Yeah, that I would consider that a part of the same thing I'm talking about. So, but yeah, I hope that this character of Dr. Kumar is here to stick around, and I hope that you're going to get a little bit more information on what it was he was trying to do and what it was he did accomplish, whether Vengeance realizes it or not. So, yeah.
Wait, so we're being held on the line for the Ghostwork? The Ghostwork thing looks so cool because, for those who don't remember, he had the thing with the eyes, and he did something to Vengeance. He did something with those eye things of his, and there's definitely something going on with machines.
Yeah,
Um, so
that's right.
because like I said, I'm dying to know. I'm dying to know is
Awesome. Well, I'm sorry to keep you waiting, but I hope that the suspense is good suspense. But yes, but what I will promise you is that like it is my intention as writer to say that that was not the final word and just a tease that we're not going to pick up later. No, no, no. I fully intend to pick it up if I'm able to.
are you able to suggest if this is Mephisto related or not Mephisto related?
Oh, I can't say. I can't say that.
Okay.
That's yeah.
And another question I had too that kind of connects as well. Obviously, there's the big Doom overarching thing that's intruding upon a lot of different comic books. Does that storyline overlap? Enter into Spirit of Vengeance?
No, we don't have any intention of crossing over with
Okay.
that storyline. In fact, I don't think the timing is going to line up for us to do that, even if we wanted to. From what I understand about their schedule for that story. Yeah, I mean, some of these things, it's tricky, especially when you get into crossover territory. It's like they're so specific about when certain things need to happen and when they need to be wrapped up, right? And sometimes it doesn't line up with another story that you're working on that may end up being on a slightly different sliding schedule based on whatever it is, artist availability or wanting to coincide with something else or wanting to avoid another event. So no, I would say we're kind of for right now, we're a bit on our own island here in terms of like the Spirits of Vengeance world, which honestly is plenty. Like it's a lot of characters already, and it's fun to explore all that. But it's a big mythology. I don't know that we need to cross over with any other events unless there's an appetite for that. Okay, then fine, sure. But yeah, right now I think I consider us on our own like, our own Spirits of Vengeance island.
Well, I think the character that we haven't mentioned yet in the world of Ghost Rider is Robbie Reyes,
Yes,
who
that's right.
I believe his origin came first in the Agent of Shield TV show and then moved into the comics. Is that correct in the order of how things happen?
Oh, is that right? So I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
So I did watch the Agents of Shield TV show, and I love Robbie Reyes and that. And I read the Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider comics, and I love those as well. I didn't realize that the show actually came first.
I,
That's news to me.
I
Wow.
I'm not someone on if I'm wrong, someone in my comment
Uh-huh.
section, please go after me on that one. But I thought it came on that one first and then but I'm pretty I don't know. I got to check
Could
that
be.
in now. I got
I
I
mean,
got
season four of Agents of Shield is still my favorite of all the seasons. I think they were just fired on all cylinders for that, and the Ghost Rider looked really cool in that show. So I thought it was very cool how they had him in the first 7 episodes, and then kind of went off to they finally did the life model decoy storyline, which was very fulfilling, and then kind of circled back around to bring him back. So it was very cool. So, but yeah, I mean, look, I'm a big fan of the comics and what they did with them, and I love that character. I love his supporting world. I love that it's in Los Angeles, which is where I live. Not exactly the same neighborhood, but yeah, it seems like a very rich world, and I love that character. So very excited that he is in Spirits of Vengeance. He shows up at the end of issue 5, and he's in issue 6 as well. So
so I think like and I may be wrong on this. So I feel
mhm.
like Robbie Reyes is the lesser known of the Ghost Riders. Well, there's a lot of people familiar with Ketch from the '90s, Blaze as the original. Right, Reyes feels like the lesser known of the Ghost Riders. I may be wrong on that, but I kind of feel like he may be. Um,
It's so funny you say that. It's having talked to quite a few people about Ghost Riders, it's like everybody's got their Ghost Rider, right?
yeah,
Like, so for a certain, I don't want to generalize, but it seemed to me that for a certain generation, Danny Ketch is the Ghost Rider. They kind of don't like any of the other ones. For a certain generation, Johnny Blaze is the Ghost Rider. When it comes to Robbie Reyes, he actually crosses generations in a way that's sort of separate from like be able to easily identify like when somebody was a certain age when they read comics or are still reading comics or whatever, when they first started reading comics, whatever. Obviously, those are very impressionable moments for all of us. But Robbie Reyes kind of transcends that a little bit, but he definitely has his fans who are extremely passionate about him and have been waiting for him to kind of return to comics in some form, right? Whether that is, leaving the God Quarry or stories that take place within the God Quarry. There have been some really interesting stories, short stories that I read that sort of feature Robbie, who's sort of still there, and it's still interesting. And if you read Spirits of Vengeance issues 5 and 6, he's still there as well, and it's an interesting predicament that he's found himself in. So yeah, I mean, like, look, I love the character, and I'm delighted that the Marvel folks have let me use him to the degree that I'm able to use him.
Well, we talk about the fans of different Ghost Riders. Do you get fans still of the Old West Ghost Rider, the one on the horse?
I mean, I'm sure there's fans for all kinds. I haven't personally been approached about wanting to see more of that necessarily, but I mean, that's the good news. It's such a big world. It's so rich. I mean, I remember reading Jason Aaron's run and just seeing all the different ghosts. I mean, the way that he expanded all the different Ghost Riders, I thought was so cool. So, I mean, yeah, hopefully there's a Ghost Rider for everybody.
Are we going to see either the Old West Ghost Rider, or I think the cosmic one is supposed to be Frank Castle, I think that's
Yes, that's right. Frank
are we
Castle from I think from the future, right? An alternate future.
right?
I remember reading those and thinking it was a really cool concept they had and well executed too, like a fun personality.
Or is there room for both of those to enter Spirits of Vengeance?
I mean, I would say anything is possible. I don't currently have plans for either of those characters, and some of that is more a question for like editorially, like do they want us to tell stories with that or not? I mean, I've kind of have figured out the story that I'm going to tell, and it is a very wide cast already. So I'm not sure there's space to bring in more, but if there is, maybe I'll take a look and see. Things always change, and sometimes it has happened in the past where it's like I would think a particular character is right to tell this part of the story or represent this conflict or whatever, and then I'll realize upon additional reading and more thinking about it that another character should actually take their place. So never say never, but no current plans. Although it sounds like you're a fan, yes?
I think Ghost Rider is one of the coolest, especially visually, characters in all of Marvel. And I was a kid
Yes.
in the '90s when Ghost Rider was the biggest thing on Earth for like there was like a good maybe 4 or 5 year point of time when he was like the biggest thing in the world, and that was like the heart of when I was buying comic books.
Amazing. Yeah.
He's such a interesting character. I think I would like to see more of Ghost Rider like in media. I mean, the movies with Nicolas Cage didn't do justice to what Ghost Rider should be, in my opinion.
Sure. Right. Yeah, I mean, look, never say never. I mean, Marvel Studios is still eager to tell so many different kinds of stories, and I totally agree with you that it is the coolest looking visual character that Marvel's come up with, really. And so, I would love to see more of Ghost Rider either on TV or film or whatever. I'll take all I can get. So, I hope it's coming. We'll see.
Well, when you think of Robbie Reyes' character, how do you also differentiate his relationship with his entity and Catch and Blaze?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, his entity was started as a much more grim kind of thing, right? It was like his uncle who was a serial killer is kind of haunting him. It's like a whole other thing,
Yeah.
So the good news is that like he's such a different character, different age, kind of different disposition that it all kind of takes its own flavor regardless. So I'm going to have to be a little bit more cryptic here in terms of what's coming, but I hope you'll see a little bit more clearly how those things are defined in future stories.
Is it challenging to try to weave all these Ghost Riders and who are very, like I said, like Robbie Reyes, who are very different stylistically, how they've been presented, and make it all feel like they exist in the same Ghost Rider world universe?
Well, it depends on in what way. So, from a mythology standpoint, sure, right? Because there have been so many different writers over the years who have tried different things, have kind of retconned each other and said that wasn't it. And now they're brothers, like that kind of thing. That like, so it is hard to reconcile all those things. And I think if one squints hard enough, they'll find that they don't always line up exactly. And you got to kind of accept and forgive that, and just kind of approach it with a more broad paintbrush to kind of see how it all fits together. So yes, there are challenges to that. However, I do think the variety is a strength more than it is a weakness, and that it is fun to populate the world with characters who are bringing different things. Kushala is another character who kind of has another different origin and can bring something new to this world. So yeah, I mean, I enjoy jumping between them. I enjoy combining them and seeing how the history of one character can kind of inform what another character is going through right now in this present day. And so, yeah, I hope that readers find the same thing, which is that they enjoy the richness of the breadth of what this mythology can offer. and see that we are trying to road towards a more holistic approach to say that there's room for all of them, but they're in the same world, and let's try to make it all fit into something that could be really cool moving forward. So that's
And
definitely the goal.
and the thing with Ghost Rider, people may not realize the character is, I believe, 50 years old, if not slightly older. Um, has been a definite decision on like this is not continuity, this is continuity, or is it an attempt to make everything feel like continuity? Like, where are you drawing your line? Like, this is what counts, this doesn't.
I draw it by saying whatever seems interesting is fair game, and whatever is not interesting to me doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It just means that I may not feature it as prominently.
Hmm.
So I try not to have hard and fast rules for that. As I mentioned before, I'm a big Grant Morrison fan, and so Grant Morrison's approach to Batman was everything counts, everything mattered, and he incorporated that into his Batman run in a way that was astonishingly cool. And so I think there's always potential for that. So I would never want to discount someone else's favorite story and say that didn't happen. But I've got my own favorites, and I've got my own things that I want to expand on, and things and new stories that I want to tell that don't rely on anything that happened before. That kind of pushes into new territories. And so whatever allows us to tell the best possible story, while being respectful to the past, is the approach that I like to take generally. So yeah, I mean, I wish I could iron down and say, hey, this one totally doesn't count, but I haven't done that. I don't think it's my place to do that as just a writer who happens to be the custodian of Ghost Rider in this moment. That's all.
So, in issue 5, did Vengeance kill Kowalski, in your opinion?
Yes, in my opinion, Kowalski is dead, and there
Okay.
will be consequences to that if I have my way.
Well, there's an interesting line. Vengeance says this: "Your corrupted flame shall be the spark of ignition for the rebirth." So, can you kind of dive into a little bit what that means?
I think he was speaking personally in terms of you know what that is for him as a figure that has been reunited with himself. In terms of Zala and Michael Badalino are now together, and now he's crushed this guy and taken his flames as sort of a source of ignition within himself. So, but what the consequences of that are going to be, Zala doesn't know. So that's
Okay.
something that's going to be, I'm spoiling a little bit here, but a little bit of a surprise to Zala and Michael Badalino that it wasn't as you can't just crush Kowalski's skull, absorb his flames, and think that there's not going to be a consequence to that. So
Are we when you're thinking about the consequences of this? Is this something that's going to happen in the next storyline, or is this again like Dr. Kumar a long throw?
I don't want to get too specific about that, but I will say issue 6 of Spirits of Vengeance will deepen that a little bit in ways that I think readers may not realize until they kind of go back, or until future stories come out to kind of say. So yes, I mean the short answer is it's not going to be as long a throw if I have my way, but again, things change, and who knows? Like maybe I'll rearrange some of those things, as stories develop. So I
So,
gotta be nice and limber about how we can kind of tell the best story in the best order. So
so issue 7 and on are guaranteed. We're definitely getting the next batch.
they are definitely they're the opposite of guaranteed. They're not happening. So Spirits of Vengeance ended with issue 6,
Okay.
and then on the last page, it says something else. It does say that it will be continued, but not under that label. So Spirits of Vengeance, as of now, is done for right now. That does not mean that I am done writing Ghost Rider. So I'm going to be a little bit vague here because again, like it's kind of more up to Marvel as to when they want to announce like what that next story is and what it looks like and all that. But all I would say is stay tuned. Do not be disheartened just because we finished at issue 6 for this particular story. Ghost Rider will ride again.
Can you, I know you probably can't say, but we don't. But do you know the timetable? Like this is going to be released sometime next year. Is it at the end of this year? Do you think?
I do know what the timetable for what the future of Ghost Rider is. Yes.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I cannot share that because Marvel, they're very specific about those things and very careful about when they want to sort of bang the drum of announcing, like, this is what the next phase of this character looks like. And so, yeah, unfortunately, I'm under a gag order here. I'm sworn to secrecy, but that's why I'm telling people. I know people are freaking out online about it. It's like, chill out. Like, if you are invested in these characters in this story, Marvel is too, and Marvel wants to give you more Ghost Rider, and we're working on it. What form that takes, what that looks like, give them some time to announce it at their own pace.
Okay. Um, for you, we'll go into, and I know we're going to talk about FBI in a second. What other comic projects are coming up for you in between?
Yeah, this is kind of it for right now. I mean, the trade paperback for the Horizon Experiment, which is an Image Comics sort of collection of one shots. That I believe that comes out in April, so I'm very much looking forward to that. I wrote one of the stories in that paperback. It's called The Sacred Damned, and it's sort of an imagining of like a Muslim version of John Constantine. So that is a mature sort of horror story. And so, if the response is good to the Horizon 6 experiment in general, that's another conversation we're all going to have together about is there a future for any of these one shots to kind of continue on? I hope that there is, but we will see. It's a little bit too early to say on that front. On the Marvel side, all I can say is I'm still working with them on what the next phase of Ghost Rider is going to be, and I hope that we can talk about more of that soon, but we can't talk about it right now. But otherwise, on the comic side, there's not much else on the horizon. I did release a original graphic novel with Image Comics called Dandelion last year in 2024, so that's available now for those who want to check that out. I did just finish a series called Venom War Lethal Protectors, which is a 3-issue series with Silver Sable and her new team that we're calling Lethal Protectors. And so, yeah, there's plenty of other stuff that I've written recently, but in terms of what's on the horizon in comics, it's going to be a little bit quieter for me in 2025, at least in the first half of it. And then beyond that, we'll see. I'm cooking on new ideas. I hope they see the light of day. But in the meantime, I'm plenty busy with television and with other things. So yeah.
So as you mentioned, you're a staff writer now on a TV show called FBI. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm a writer on staff. So staff writer in the realm of television, like there's a whole like hierarchy of what means what, and so that term staff writer actually has a very specific definition that I don't fit currently. But for all intents and purposes, yes, I am a writer on the TV show called FBI. Specifically, I joined the staff in season 7, which is airing now currently. And yeah, it's been a blast of an experience. I hope people get a chance to check out that show. It's a really cool show. But love the cast, love the writing team. So yeah.
So as a staff writer, we are using the right term? I'm not using the right term.
No, not quite. Yeah.
Yeah.
As a writer on staff, you can say, or just as a writer of the show, my official title is co-executive producer. But these things are kind of hard to break down exactly what that means for people who are not in the industry. So I wouldn't sweat it.
Well, co-executive producer sounds impressive. I don't know. That sounds more impressive than writer on
Great. I'll
staff.
take it. Let's go with that.
That's awesome. What is it? Does writing a comic book and writing for a TV series have similarities in fact that you're writing for voices that you didn't necessarily start off with for characters?
Yeah, I'd say that's true. You're working with established material usually, right? And you have to fit within that framework. For television, I'm more writing for performance, whereas for comics, I'm writing more for the artist to showcase their visuals. So that's one of the bigger differences between the two mediums. But in general, like I actually think television and serialized comics, like for a big entity such as Marvel, are actually quite similar in a lot of ways that I think has been fun for me to explore.
So as a writer on staff, are you writing with is it you writing like individually or is there like a writer room that you're taking part
We've
in?
got a whole writers' room. It was like I think it must be like what is that, 10 of us maybe? Some of them are teams of 2 writers, which is why it gets a little bit fuzzy in my head. It's like, well, how many of us are there? There's a lot of us. And we have a great time in the writers' room. We all share our ideas with each other. We pitch to one another. We stand in front of a whiteboard and we go, okay, here's what I got. And then we'll pick them apart together and say, well, I don't know about this. I got confused at this part, but maybe if we switched it to this, let's try to solve these things together. We are generous with each other in writing material for one another so that every writer gets everyone's best material on an episode, and we all get to take a lot of ownership over the entire show. So there's some stuff we're all really proud of, even if like one person's name is on this episode but my name is on that episode in terms of what we've written. So it's a very collaborative atmosphere, and it's really really fun. I enjoy it immensely, and comics are a fun collaborative atmosphere as well, because you have the editor, you do have the artist, you have the colorist, you have the letterer, you have all these different passes that you go through. So we're making tweaks to the dialogue right before it goes to the printer because we all want the best product, and want to make sure that nothing is confusing and that we're laying the right groundwork for what's going to happen next. So Yeah, that's the collaboration. The collaborative element is my favorite part of both mediums that I work in.
It's, as someone who only does, I do some writing on the side, and I know as a writer, my ego about my writing is probably larger than it should be when you think about it because it's a baby. So I can't imagine being in a room of 10 people trying to get every ego to give a thumbs up on any piece of writing because I can just imagine, that I want that. That was my idea. That's my part of the baby. I want to
Sure.
that. I mean, is it hard to kind of relinquish that when you're writing with that many other writers?
It is not for me on this particular show, I will say. And the reason for that is because we all kind of know what the show is. It's season 7 of FBI. The characters are well defined. The types of stories that the show tells are well defined. So we're all driven primarily by excitement. It's like, what have we not done on this show yet? Well, where can we push things a little bit? Where can we showcase the awesome performance ability of these actors that everybody knows and loves? And so it's kind of all hands on deck. More often than not, it's more like, hey, can you help me with your ideas than it is, oh, I've got an idea, like I'm not going to share it with you because I want the credit. Like we don't have that on this show because we all know what the show is. We want to make the best show, and we're all very excited by each other's ideas, and we feed off of them. It's a little bit like being in a band, I imagine. Not that I've ever been in a band, where it's like if you're all in sync and all in rhythm with each other, you bring out the best in each other, and the music sounds great. And if one person's kind of out of sync, you can kind of sense it a little bit and be like, wait, this isn't quite lining up, So it kind of feels like that, where it's like the sum really is greater than the parts. So
Having the series that goes on for 7 years, is it different? Is it how difficult is it to come up with ideas that do feel unique to a 7 season instead of feeling like something that because a lot of shows have been up for a lot of years, they get kind of in a mode where you're kind of just a good example was like Home Improvement. The
mhm.
sitcom where you can kind of it would kind of follow the same format every freaking episode. And as you go on, you can kind of like the audience can kind of just tell when something was going to happen because you
Sure.
watched it enough times. After 7 years, is it hard to make sure the episodes feel fresh and unique and not rehashing what's been around? And where are you drawing that kind of larger ideas from to make it feel distinct from other episodes?
Yeah, I mean, look, it depends on the show. I mean, in the case of FBI, I mean, we take a lot of inspiration from real life and real events if we can, and then we use that as a springboard, and then we start combining it with, okay, well, what have we done before, and what's the new spin on a certain thing, and then see if we can kind of expand things from there, so that it turns into something new by the time you watch it. We don't
Hmm.
always have to start with something new. We have to finish with something new, and that's a process. And sometimes that's hard, and sometimes it's easy where we're looking around and we go, wait, have we really not done this story before? And we go, yeah, I guess no one's done it before. And that's always really exciting when we stumble into something that feels so obvious and such a natural fit. And yet across 7 seasons, it just hasn't been done. We had one of those discoveries the other day and got very excited about it. So, anything goes. Some days it's harder than others just to fit into a particular box where we have certain parameters. And all of a sudden we realize that like, this feels a lot like another episode that we already like and that we've already kind of done 3 seasons ago. And that's always a fun challenge though, which is to say, okay, if we've already done that, where can we now zag where we used to zig?
Hmm.
So it's a fun challenge. It really depends on the day. Sometimes it's harder than others, and sometimes you get a nice little gift of an idea that for whatever reason no one's done, and then you run with it and have fun with it. So
Does because the show, FBI, does it how impacted is it from real world events, situations, changing outlooks on things? Is there an awareness, or is the world of FBI the world of FBI and is removed from anything else that's happening around it?
yeah, I mean, look, currently this season, I would say it's not impacted at all by those things. If I understand your question correctly, that it kind of exists in its own world, and people tune in because they want to see these characters perform as FBI agents, in an apparatus where they're used to kind of seeing certain things happen. That's all I'll say. Now, will we start to play with some of those things in future seasons? I cannot speak to that. I'm not. I'm one of the writers on the show, but I'm not the writer in charge of the entire vision of the show. And so, stay tuned and wait and see. But if you like these characters and you've been tuning in to kind of see them, stop terrorism and solve crimes and protect New York, you're going to get more of that as we move forward because we have no intention of breaking the show. We love the show. we want to protect the show more than anything else.
So for any listeners that have not seen FBI yet, where can they find it?
You can find it on CBS on Tuesdays, I believe at 8 o'clock in most places. Although it airs at 7 o'clock at in a few parts of the country, and then you can find it on Paramount Plus. So it's sort of like first window opening night is on CBS, and then I believe the next day by I believe midnight or 2 a.m. or something like that. I'm not quite sure the exact hour. It's there on Paramount Plus. So.
All right, very cool, Mr. Pirzada. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's an absolute pleasure to talk with you, sir.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to do this.
Thank you so much.
Talk
Have a
soon.
fantastic night.
You too. Take care.